Yeah, this video might be a bit rambly. I don't have a script for it and sort of had to make it one or two times, so if I make any mistakes now, I think I might just power through this time. People wandering around in the woods behind me. But I'm making the video because I want to talk about videos that you see on YouTube about being 90% or so recovered from depersonalisation, or the people that describe it as a transient experience that sort of passes with time, and my disagreement with that to some extent, or at least its incompatibility, right now at least, with my experience of depersonalisation. Because I got DP about 2 years ago, 2 years and 2 months ago, January 2018, and for about 5 months I had the really horrible, unbelievably crippling existential anxiety that most people associate with depersonalisation. Right? So we wake up dissociated because we smoked weed and freaked out or whatever, and part of depersonalisation is the freeze response or the flight or fright response. Well, I didn't really say that right, but you know what I mean. You get this sort of part of your autonomic nervous system that activates, tells you fight, flight or freeze. It's the freeze response involved in that sort of immediate response to threat, and it becomes chronic. Right? So with that is this feeling of absolute hopelessness, like you're completely fucked. And simultaneously though, there's an absence of immediate threat. So we theorize about where the threat's coming from, and immediately we know something is terribly wrong. And when I say we know something is terribly wrong, it's not the case that actually something is terribly wrong, but you feel it in yourself, right? You feel like you're trapped. You feel like something awful has either happened or is about to happen. And for most people with DP, we focus on the immediate conditions that we experience. So a lack of a sense of self, a feeling of automation, and we cling on to that and ruminate our existential questions associated with that phenomenology. But it could be anything, really. Like for the first week when I had depersonalisation, I was freaking out, or trying to freak out about all kinds of things, trying to work out why I was freaking out. So I thought about, had I stopped believing in truth, or things like that, which don't really have a lot to do with the experience, the physical experience of depersonalisation. But after a week or so, I sort of locked on to the idea of free will. I started freaking out about free will and nihilism, because hence the numbness as well, for about 5 months. But after about 5 months, I'd found a way to sort of, I guess you could say, satisfy those questions. I found answers that I thought were sufficient to respond. And I thought in myself, well, that's how I've got over it. And I've moved into this 60, 70, 80% recovered section, that people describe, this phase in depersonalisation, and eventually it will pass. And I'm not so sure it was really the answers that I got that brought about the passage away from the existential obsessions. Maybe to some extent they were, in the sense that they relaxed me, but it was really the relaxation, right? That it slightly brings you out of this state of threat. And then when you're out of the state of threat, all of a sudden you don't necessarily feel quite as depersonalised, or you don't feel the pain of depersonalisation. And one associates that with recovery. Now, maybe it is a partial recovery, maybe it's a coping mechanism. I think maybe partial recovery might be a sort of sufficient explanation, because there are people that talk about, it completely going for them, and they've reconstituted their sense of self, and they're doing fine in the world. So perhaps it was a sort of partial recovery that I had. But unfortunately I've sort of relapsed over the last 3 months. And I think the reason for that is because though we can put in place these coping mechanisms, and though we can have a sort of maybe complete recovery to some extent, the underlying issue that causes depersonalisation is not the drug abuse, right? And I think for most people that get it, they get it because of drug abuse, kind of like, the switch or the instigator. I sort of think of it more like this, that if you have a heart attack, right, you spent 20 years eating bacon every day, right, and then someone jumps in front of you and says boo. Well, the reason you had a heart attack is because someone jumped in front of you and said boo. There's another reason though, it's because you ate bacon for 20 years. And the same thing's true with depersonalisation. So this is what I've been looking up on for the past month or so, ever since I had my relapse into existential rumination, is that most people who suffer with depersonalisation or some kind of dissociative disorder do so because there is a splitting in your sense of self. itself, right? Or what constitutes that underlying self or soul. So there's two systems internal to the brain that shouldn't be enmeshed in the way that they are in the mind or the soul of a lot of people with depersonalization. And what that is the attachment system and the fight or flight response, or this immediate or freeze, this immediate response to danger. And the reason being is because most of us have gone through some kind of abuse when we were younger, or maybe not even younger, I don't know, but for me it was when I was younger. And because of that, and particularly this is the important thing, that the abuse comes from somebody that we associate with guardianship, that we associate with comfort. And so because of that, there's this contradiction inherent in the brain where we're in danger, we perceive threat, whether that's physical, sexual, emotional, whatever. And even just being ignored, for a human, that's quite threatening, because it sort of implies we might be abandoned, and if you're abandoned into the wild, you're fucked. So we experience some kind of perceived threat, but the person who we are experiencing it from is also the person that we go to when we are in need of comfort. So there's this splitting in the brain. In the exact same moment, there's a part of you that's telling you to get away. There's a part of you that's telling you to move closer to that person that's abusing you. It's the same as, I sort of heard it described, sometimes when you're standing on top of a tall building or a cliff, or you're standing on a platform in front of a train, your body gives you this urge to move forward. And where does that come from, right? Are we all like suicidal or something? Well, what I've heard speculated about it is that your survival instinct kicks in and it pulls you away from that precipice, that danger that's there. But the part of your body or your brain or whatever that's in charge of balancing isn't understanding that that's what's going on, so it attempts to counteract that and move you forward. There's this inherent contradiction going on in your brain, and it's the same thing with depersonalization. I would venture to guess in most cases that when we were younger, or whenever, we developed this condition of associating comfort, or the seeking of comfort, with threat. So you can never be fully relaxed. And when you seek relaxation, it further perpetuates this system. And when you go through a very deeply stressful experience, like having, for example, a panic attack on weed, your brain or your soul or whatever, that sense of self, completely splits. And that's depersonalization. That's what that is. So you can have a partial recovery, right? You relax yourself, you can find some coping mechanism for the existential questions, and that will go away. But eventually, you'll go through something traumatic again, like maybe some other form of abuse, and immediately you're going to split because you haven't tackled the underlying attachment issues that cause depersonalization. So all these people that are telling you in these videos, you just need to wait, you just need to, go play the fucking banjo and come back one day, you'll be fine, you just need to relax. That's not true, unless you get lucky, right, and you never go through some kind of abuse again. But if you have this underlying attachment issue, you have some kind of insecure, dysfunctional, or disorganized attachment, then when you go through extreme stress, like, for example, like a breakup, like a really bad breakup, that's associated with attachment, you're going to go again, and you're going to sink back into depersonalization. And the most horrible elements of it, the existential rumination, the fear, the panic, the complete loss of soul, it will come back. So what you actually need to do is seek treatment. You need to seek treatment on the attachment style itself. At least this is what I'm sort of beginning to realize. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else really to say, but I'm going to keep posting videos and see how I get on with it, and whether or not this is really accurate. Okay, so cheers.